somebody comes to you with a lot of money, it changes. I just got to do what's best for me and my family, dog.
There was guys on the field that were competing, and we were trying to win a game, so my focus was there.
If it is, hey,
I've been watching the NFL for a very long time, and I don't think I've ever seen in an exit interview a player quite literally demanding a trade. And in this particular case, out of all players, for that player to be Tyreek Hill is absolutely hilarious. So before we get to the content, we are so close to 1 million subscribers. Make sure you subscribe and turn on our notifications to help us realize a milestone of a lifetime on this channel. And now that we get all that out of the way, work! We've been dominating when we've been making picks for the NBA and the NFL on Prize Picks. If you haven't played Prize Picks before and you're really good at guessing player projections, you can make yourself a decent amount of money. I give away my picks on my Instagram story at @TheFlightMike, and right now when you use my promo code Mikerophone and make an entry of $5 or more, you'll get a free $50. And thank you, Prize Picks, for the sponsor. Mic check 1 2 1 2. What's going on, everybody? The 2022 NFL offseason changed the landscape of the entire NFL, and it's primarily because we saw wide receivers getting paid an unprecedented amount of money. This unofficially started with Christian Kirk getting a huge contract from the Jacksonville Jaguars, which eventually resulted in Davante Adams being next in line to get a huge payday. Davante Adams would then get traded from the Green Bay Packers to the Las Vegas Raiders and agreed to a 5-year, $140 million contract with them. While this was all going on, Tyreek Hill was in contract extension talks with the Kansas City Chiefs, and why wouldn't he be? He's been experiencing unprecedented success with the Chiefs. He had arguably the best quarterback in the NFL throwing him the football. It only made sense for him to try to return to the team that he won a Super Bowl with. But alas, that's not what would end up happening. Tyreek Hill saw the amount of money he could earn from another team that had significantly more cap space and agreed to a trade that would send him to the Miami Dolphins. Once doing that, he would sign a huge contract extension with the Miami Dolphins as well. And he didn't have to be a genius to realize why Tyreek Hill made this decision. I mean, he wasn't going to the Miami Dolphins to win, and there's no question that the Miami Dolphins definitely had the pieces that were needed to potentially win. But when you're going from the best team in the NFL to a lesser team that is paying you money, I mean, even Tyreek Hill himself said what the primary motivation for this was.
It's tough. It's tough, man, but if somebody comes to you with a lot of money, it changes. It changes. The feelings start to change a little bit.
And I didn't fault him for that. I mean, he won a Super Bowl with the Kansas City Chiefs. We all knew what this was. He just wanted to get a huge payday while he was in his prime, and he prioritized that over winning more Super Bowls. And I don't have anything against that. I mean, he even said that he chose the Miami Dolphins over the New York Jets because there was no state income tax in Miami. I personally thought it was a brilliant move to make sure that his entire bloodline, which is a pretty large bloodline so far, secured generational wealth for themselves, and I didn't hate that decision at all. And what Tyreek Hill would do next would kind of give you an indication that he was very insecure about his decision. I mean, he'd immediately go on a podcast and say that Tua was more accurate than Patrick Mahomes.
As far as accuracy wise, I'm going with Tua all day.
This is not a shot at anybody.
Right.
This is just stuff that had to be said.
It needed to be said.
It
so
needed
let's
to be
say
said.
You can just tell from Patrick Mahomes' response, he didn't really care much for what Tyreek had to say.
I haven't talked to him since the podcast that came out, but I mean, I talked to him in Formula One in Miami in May, and everything seemed fine. So it's something where I'm sure he's trying to show that he loves where he's at in Miami. He loves his teammates.
But Tyreek Hill would spend the next couple of years stirring the pot consistently between himself and the Kansas City Chiefs. I mean, he even claimed that he wanted to stay with the Kansas City Chiefs, but said that he was jealous about his usage.
When did you think that there's a possibility, you know what, man, I might not finish my career in Kansas City?
I'm the type of guy, like, I love playing ball and I love, being by the team. And it will be some games where like I get 2 targets, I get 3 targets. We'll go into meetings and my coach will be like, hey, we got to get you involved. We got to get you involved. And I'm like,
Get me involved yesterday. Don't tell me about it today.
exactly. Like,
But at the end of the day, you don't have to be a genius to know what this is all about. He just wanted to get paid more, and nobody faulted him for it. I mean, nobody could fault him for it. He won a Super Bowl. He just wanted to get paid. I don't blame him, especially because once you get into your 30s in the NFL and your production starts to subside, even if you're productive in your 30s, you're not getting paid as much as the contract that Tyreek Hill got originally with the Miami Dolphins. And to be fair, in the very beginning, Tyreek Hill had incredible numbers with the Miami Dolphins. I mean, sure, he didn't experience as much team success as he did before, but throughout the regular season, whenever the Miami Dolphins would play against lesser teams, Tyreek Hill was very entertaining to watch. In his first season with the Dolphins, he had his most receiving yards throughout his career, over 1,700 yards receiving and 7 touchdowns. But of course, the Miami Dolphins would get knocked out in their first game in the playoffs. In their very next year, in 2023, he'd beat his previous record for most receiving yards in a season, 1,799 receiving yards and 13 touchdowns. But once again, the Miami Dolphins would get knocked out in the Ice Bowl, ironically against his former team. But this past year, things were a little bit different. The Miami Dolphins were very aggressive in trying to build a team around Tua and Tyreek Hill. They made trades for Jalen Ramsey. They hired Vic Fangio prior to the 2023 season, and that didn't really work out. They made trades for Bradley Chubb. They signed Teron Armstead during the Tyreek Hill era. And alas, they were just never able to get past their first playoff game each and every season. But things went from bad to worse this past season, starting with Tua suffering a horrific concussion, which handicapped the Dolphins to start the season. And even once Tua came back, Tyreek Hill wasn't able to get on the same page with him, leading to the worst season that the Miami Dolphins have ever had in the Tyreek Hill era, not even making it to the playoffs, with Tyreek Hill getting 959 receiving yards and 6 touchdowns. Throughout the season, Tyreek Hill was flirting with his former team. I mean, he posted his Kansas City Chiefs highlights onto his Snapchat story, and now following their final game of the season, Tyreek Hill quite literally demanded a trade from the Miami Dolphins. Now, Tyreek Hill's final game was very similar to Antonio Brown's final game for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, not in the sense that he marched off of the field and chucked up the deuces to everybody, but more so that Mike McDaniel was informed that Tyreek Hill would be unavailable before a drive.
I was informed that he was unavailable right before a drive. I was not informed that it was a new injury, and I think at that point in time my focus was on the players, and I didn't take the time to go try to figure out more into that. Just there was guys on the field that were competing, and we were trying to win a game, so my focus was there.
Now, what Mike McDaniel is referring to is Tyreek Hill, quite literally after the game, came out and said this.
I just got to do what's best for me and my family, dog. If that's here, if that's wherever the case may be, man, I'm finna open that door for myself, dog. As I'm opening the door, like I'm out, bro. So it was great playing here, but at the end of the day, bro, I got to do what's best for for my career and what's best, because I'm too much of a competitor to be just out there.
Tyreek Hill would also double down on this by saying, "Love Finn Nation, blessing y'all, open doors for the Hill family, forever nothing but respect and love." So he doubled down on his trade demand. Now, for those of you guys wondering if this has to do with Mike McDaniel or not, or if the Dolphins are thinking of firing Mike McDaniel after him having a lukewarm start throughout his career, I mean, on one hand, when the Dolphins play lesser teams, they're one of the most exciting teams in football, but at the same time, they've boasted terrible records against winning teams. They've had no playoff success at all whatsoever, and you have to admit, Mike McDaniel usually has an incredible roster to compete with, particularly in the 2023 season. And the fact that they're not even able to win one playoff game in the era so far definitely has some fans wondering if McDaniel is on the hot seat. But alas, we know that Mike McDaniel is going to return, and so is Chris Grier for the 2025 season. Now, let's talk about Tyreek Hill for a second, because I think this is quite possibly the funniest trade demand that I have ever seen in all of my life of being an NFL fan. And it's because it's one of those situations where a star has made his bed, but he refuses to sleep in it. You left Kansas City, you're consistently in the conversation for a Super Bowl, you went to nice and sunny Miami, you got paid handsomely to do so, and you did have an opportunity to compete. If you really wanted to be on the best team in the NFL, then you should have just taken less money to play for the Kansas City Chiefs. And I think what really is worrying Tyreek Hill here is the fact that he knows that if he puts together another season like this, then come time for him to be a free agent once again, or when he's up for another contract extension, teams aren't going to be willing to sign him for the amount that he's currently getting paid for, or even half the amount that he's currently getting paid for. And I think that's what the urgency here is. In terms of the salary cap, this is how it all works out for a Tyreek Hill trade. If Tyreek Hill gets traded before March 15th, the new team acquires $28.65 million in guaranteed salary and $36 million in non-guaranteed salary, and the Dolphins dead cap goes to about $28.3 million. But this is also a pretty nice time to demand a trade because there's some really good teams that could definitely use a wide receiver. Everyone's gonna romanticize Tyreek Hill being traded back to the Kansas City Chiefs, and I'm not necessarily sure if they would go for that. I mean, Kansas City did reshape its receiving core recently with Hollywood Brown and DeAndre Hopkins, but those two are set to become free agents in 2025, which means that the Chiefs will only have Rashee Rice and Xavier Worthy. But the problem for the Chiefs is if they want to bring Tyreek Hill back, the Chiefs are going to have to move some salary around because currently they have $20.2 million in projected cap space if they were to move on from DeAndre Hopkins and Hollywood Brown, which they could clear the cap to get him, but would it make sense for them as opposed to riding with the current wide receivers they have? I think there are much more fun teams out there for Tyreek Hill to go to. I mean, could you imagine him potentially teaming up with Cliff Kingsbury, Jaden Daniels, and the Washington Commanders, giving Jaden Daniels, Terry McLaurin, and Tyreek Hill to throw the football to? You saw how good Jaden Daniels was this past season with Terry McLaurin, Olamide Zaccheaus, Jamison Crowder, and Zach Ertz, and Jaden Daniels led them to a 12-5 record. So imagine getting Tyreek Hill on that roster as well. Another great team that could easily acquire Tyreek Hill is a team that has the most cap space in the entire NFL, a team that is going to look significantly different next year, and that's the New England Patriots. The Patriots really swung as hard as they could to get a wide receiver for Drake May to throw the football to last offseason. Calvin Ridley chose the Tennessee Titans over them. Brandon Ayuk didn't want to go to the New England Patriots either, but after Drake May's quality rookie season, then there's sure to be some wide receivers that are going to want to play with him. And the fact that the Patriots have a league-high $131.7 million in projected salary cap for 2025 means that they are one of the more likely contenders to trade for Tyreek Hill. But would that necessarily result in Tyreek Hill winning more? Probably my favorite team to potentially trade for Tyreek Hill, and probably the most entertaining team to trade for Tyreek Hill, is the Los Angeles Chargers. The Chargers are projected to have under $75 million in cap space during the offseason, and they clearly need a wide receiver to pair with Ladd McConkey. It would be a very undersized wide receiver duo with Ladd McConkey, but could you just imagine Justin Herbert and Tyreek Hill together? I don't necessarily know how much this would work in a Greg Roman offense, but it would be a really balanced offense with the Los Angeles Chargers run schemes, in addition to Justin Herbert's ability to find Tyreek Hill on deep throws. And the Chargers are my #1 contender to potentially trade for Tyreek Hill. Tyreek Hill will also get the opportunity to face off against the Kansas City Chiefs twice a year, so that's an added bonus. At the end of the day, I think this whole scenario is hysterical because it's one of those situations where Tyreek Hill made his bed, but he refuses to sleep in it. The result of all of this turmoil led to Mike McDaniel having a 1-hour meeting with Tyreek Hill just yesterday, and this was the result according to Mike McDaniel.
I want to say an hour yesterday, I think there's the competitive spirit of his, can represent, post game, especially in a season or a game that nobody likes. It could allude to a relationship being one way. I think I was very direct with him. He was very honest, and it was great terms that we were discussing. Discussed multiple things, including without wavering, that it's not acceptable to leave the game and won't be tolerated in the future. And he embraced accountability, and it was. I wouldn't say there's anything necessarily to fix, as much as we had to clear the air in a rough and tumultuous situation.
Let me know in the comment section down below what do you guys think about this, guys. Aside from that, I'm your boy Mike, and I'm dropping our mic until our next upload.